Latest driving test questions today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. Why have red routes been introduced in major cities? Why should you try and park in a secure car park? Which type of sign tells you what you must not do? What makes your tires illegal? When is fuel consumption at its highest? What does this sign mean? Why do MOT tests include an exhaust emission test? Which sign indicates that the national speed limit applies depending on the type of road and vehicle? How can you reduce the chances of your car being broken into when leaving it unattended? Where would parking your vehicle cause an obstruction? How much more fuel will you use by driving at 70 miles per hour, compared with driving at 50 miles per hour? What can you expect if you drive using rapid acceleration and heavy braking? What does this sign mean? How can you reduce the environmental harm caused by your motor vehicle? You're carrying two 13-year-old children and their parents in your car. Who's responsible for seeing that the children wear seat belts? When should you check the engine oil level? You service your own vehicle. How should you dispose of the old engine oil? What makes the vehicle in the picture environmentally friendly? You're carrying an 11-year-old child on the front seat of your car. They're under 1.35 meters, 4 feet 5 inches, tall. What seat belt security must be in place? How can you avoid wasting fuel? What does it mean if your vehicle keeps bouncing after you sharply press down and release on the bodywork over a wheel? How will a roof rack affect your car? How can you reduce the risk of your vehicle being broken into at night? What will help you to keep your car secure? What does fuel-efficient driving achieve? When are you not allowed to sound your vehicle's horn? Why are these yellow lines painted across the road? Why is it a good idea to plan your journey to avoid busy times? What's the legal minimum depth of tread for car tires? Where should you avoid overtaking? How should you dispose of a used vehicle battery? Which type of vehicle does this sign apply to? What could you do to reduce the volume of traffic on the roads? What could cause you to crash if the level is allowed to get too low? What should you do when you move off from behind a parked car? You're waiting to emerge from a junction. The windscreen pillar is restricting your view. What should you be particularly aware of? What should you do when you're approaching traffic lights that have been green for some time? What does this sign mean? You're traveling along this road. How should you pass the cyclist? You're on a long motorway journey. What should you do if you start to feel sleepy? Why should you switch your headlights on when it first starts to get dark? What does this sign mean? What does the term blind spot mean? What should you do if your mobile phone rings while you're driving or riding? You're driving on a wet road. What should you do if you have to stop your vehicle in an emergency? Which sign means no motor vehicles allowed? You're turning right onto a dual carriageway. What should you do before emerging? When do windscreen pillars cause a serious obstruction to your view? What does this sign mean? What should you do as you approach this bridge? You're waiting to turn right at the end of a road. What should you do if your view is obstructed by parked vehicles? What shape are traffic signs giving orders? What's most likely to distract you while you're driving? Why should you use your mirrors when you see a hazard ahead? You're driving your car. When may you use a handheld mobile phone? What does this sign mean? What should you do before slowing down or stopping your vehicle? What does this sign mean? You're following a large vehicle. Why should you stay a safe distance behind it? There are objects hanging from your interior mirror. Why could this be a hazard? What does this traffic sign mean? How can you make sure that a satellite navigation, sat-nav, system doesn't distract you when you're driving? If you have any comments, please leave me a comment. How can you identify traffic signs that give orders? What does this curved arrow road marking mean? What does this sign 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 mean? What's the meaning of this traffic sign? What does this sign mean? What shape is a stop sign? What does a sign with a brown background show? What does this sign mean? Where would you see a contraflow bus lane? What does this sign mean? What does this sign mean? What does this sign mean? What's the purpose of triangular-shaped signs? What does this traffic sign mean? Which traffic sign indicates that frail or elderly pedestrians may be crossing? What does this sign mean? Which sign means there's a double bend ahead? What does this sign mean? What does this sign mean? What does this traffic sign mean? Which sign means the end of a dual carriageway? What does this sign mean? 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 You're about to overtake. What should you do when you see this sign? What does this sign mean? 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 Which is the sign for a ring road? What does this sign mean? What does this sign mean? What does this sign indicate on motorways?